Welcome back, everyone. This is Austin Reville with 2F by C Tactical on our From the Vault series, featuring unique, historical, and interesting firearms that we either can get our hands on coming through our shop up for sale, or even maybe rentals at our upcoming indoor range project. And today we have a real treat for you. We have a PPS-43 submachine gun. This is a post-sample, post-86 full auto sample, chambered in that 7.62 by 25 Tokarev cartridge. With the extending foldable stock, they did make a wooden stock variant. This particular one was made in 1953 out of the Polish factory. These are the brothers of the famed PPSH-41. So sticking with Russian naming of firearms, the PP is their submachine gun pistol designation. The S is Sudayev, which was the individual who designed this particular variant of that submachine gun series, and chambered in that 7.62 by 25 Tokarev cartridge. These are almost direct copies of the PPS-41, which, if you grew up in the Call of Duty era, and when I say Call of Duty, I'm talking about the first one that came out in the early 2000s, the Russian campaign that was started in Stalingrad, you had an opportunity to get your hands on the PPS-41. Very high rate of fire, chambered in that Tokarev cartridge, a really excellent submachine gun. But during the Siege of Stalingrad, the Soviets ran into some real problems. They're getting bombed to oblivion by the Germans. They're constantly under fire. And at this point, it's 1942, and they are losing the campaign. They need to find a way to get guns in the hands of their soldiers quickly and produce them as fast as they possibly can. The PPSH-41 did have some complexities to the manufacturing in terms of some milling work that needed to be done and how you made the receivers and such. Whereas Sudayev came up with an idea of, like, what if we take that design and we just basically stamp sheet metal everything that we possibly can. So this features a sheet metal stamped receiver with some heat holes in the heat shield. There's some very simple welds. You got pins holding the top piece to the bottom piece. Some very simple welds affixing the magazine well in here. You also have some pins that were, or rivets, I should say, that hold the trigger guard into place. Broadly speaking, there isn't a lot of welding actually going on in this at all. This is mostly folded sheet metal with rivets holding this thing together, and it would cut down on the manufacturing time significantly to the point where they could crank out 3 or 4 of these compared to the PPSH-41. These were made right in the middle of battle, which is what is so unique about these guns. You're in Stalingrad. Just imagine, enemy at the gates. It's a bombed out city. You're in Stalingrad, and the Germans are closing in, and there's factories still producing things despite all that. These hollowed out, shelled out factories. The forgeries are still working. The stamping is still working. The boss, as they say, Joseph Stalin, has ordered everyone into the front, including civilians, and that you're forced to work under these pretty terrible conditions. And they were able to produce millions of these guns, certainly tens of thousands during the Battle of Stalingrad. While this is a post-war sample, this really does not change in terms of its design and overall features all the way up to the 1970s. And that's kind of what's unique about this particular submachine gun. The Russians would move away from the submachine gun with the AK-74U, with that 5.45 cartridge. And that really brought into the world the carbine. And we see that continuing on today, where submachine guns are kind of left without a home in the modern military. When it comes to this one, though, this was kind of that bridge gap from the end of the submachine gun world to the modern carbine. And what I mean by that is why we here in the United States, we were using Thompsons during World War II, which was really World War I era designs. We did come up with the M3 grease gun as our replacement for that. Those certainly saw service in Vietnam and Korea. But by Korea, we were really searching for a new submachine gun. That's where we see like the Mac 10 or the Mac 11, which I showed you guys previously, kind of showed up as we start shopping around. Mazda M50s, the Smith & Wesson 76. Then we would eventually get the MP5 and some of these other things that would come out of the 80s, late 70s, early 80s, post-Vietnam. We were really searching for that submachine gun variant. Whereas the Russians, for the most part, stuck with this design. They didn't really change anything about it. The fire rate on the 43 was brought down compared to the 41. The 41 had an absolutely unbelievable, like 1,200 rounds a minute fire rate. One of the fastest shooting submachine guns out there. Despite that, it's actually quite controllable. I've had the opportunity to shoot a full auto version of the PPS-41. It is still actually quite controllable and really a pleasure to shoot. They thickened up the bolt in these, slowed down the fire rate. One of the main differences in terms of what this one can't do or can do, depending on how you look at it, versus the PPS-41. The 41 was designed to take drum magazines. They eventually realized the unreliability of drum magazines, so they went to a stick mag, where these have this folded mag well to take only the stick magazine option. You don't get to use your drum magazines with this particular design. It's a solid bolt, fixed firing pin. This is an open bolt submachine gun, meaning it fires from the open position. When the bolt slams forward, the cartridge is fired, the bolt reciprocates back, and the new cartridge is loaded. So very simple design. Really nothing to this. You have a little bar that's attached to the trigger, and just by holding it down, that bar goes away, and it allows the bolt to run freely until you expend all your ammunition out of your magazine. This does not have a semi-auto function on it. This is full auto only. It does have a safety in this bar right here. If you push back, it's safe. Push forward, it's fire. The folding stock is rather interesting, and believe it or not, for this stock, it is fairly sturdy to really brace it into you. And it folds up rather neatly. You just rotate the butt plate all the way over. You push the button right here on the top. Folds over. There's a hole in the butt stock, which allows your rear sight to sink into it. And you have a relatively overall compact design, which is, when you look at it like this, not all that too dissimilar from the MP40 in terms of its overall profile. It does take some of that MP40, MP38 ideas with the stocks and all, where they did an over folder for this one, where the Germans did an under folder. It's a little bit longer in the overall receiver than the MP40, but it does have some similarities. One of the things they did add is this pistol grip here to this particular gun, whereas the PPS-41 is a wooden stock, very traditional. You grip over the stock. There's no pistol grip to it. So they did in some ways modernize this, I guess, a little bit. It doesn't feature any scope mounts or any kind of red dot options. Those did not exist, despite what Call of Duty and them would have you believe back in those days. And this gun is still in service today. You want to talk about a gun that saw pretty much every major conflict on the eastern side of the world from, say, 1942, World War II, all the way up to the current day. This is one of the few that is true. Of course, they saw World War II. They saw Korea on the side of the North Koreans. They saw Vietnam on the northern Vietnamese side. They saw the first Indochina War. They saw the Cambodian War. And then if we want to fast forward all the way into the modern world, they are still popping up in the Ukrainian War. This kicked off in 2014 with the invasion of Crimea, and of course in 2022 with the invasion of Western Ukraine. There are pictures of both sides actually using these guns, mostly as a whatever they can get the hands on. Is both sides' desperation for arms continues. You also got to remember that Ukraine was a part of the Warsaw Pact nations back during the Soviet Union. So there's a lot of Soviet guns still floating around the Ukraine, even though the wall came down, 30-something years ago. These guns certainly were available in Ukraine. Poland made millions of them, and they certainly got some from their own factories. This is actually a really fun gun to shoot. The Tokarev cartridge, I think, is very underrated. I would very much like someone, if you're listening, Hornaday, I don't know, Browning, anyone, to start looking at making modern runs of this, but modern runs and get into the powder loads, the grain counts, bring some of that modern ballistic genius that we have seen propel like 380 and 9mm into a new stratosphere. That would be awesome to see with this bottleneck, which is really a cut down rifle cartridge. For stuff like this. There are some semi-auto variants of these out there. Pioneer Arms did do some runs where they would weld the stock folded, so therefore you stayed with the pistol designation and you weren't an SBR. It is a 10.4-inch barrel on this, so it is under the 16-inch barrel marker for the United States NFA markings. There are converts, there are converts, I should say, out there from open bolt to closed bolt, again, to make it compliant. There are a bunch of people that build these online still from parts kits. These parts kits aren't very expensive. You can get them for under $300. And as long as you put in the blocking bars and do what you need to do to the bolt to convert it to closed bolt, and again, comply with overall barrel length. There are people who make 16-inch barrels for this, so you can have the stock, or weld the stock closed, so you can have the short barrel. There are variations of that out there. This is certainly something that you, if you have any kind of welding know-how, could do in your own garage. They're quite simple to make. And again, you got to remember, these were designed to be cranked out of factories that were actively getting bombed. So they need to be simple, they need to be fast, and they need to be reliable. These are extremely reliable guns. The only thing that will slow this thing down is the ammo, which in 7.62 by 25, I've run a lot of military surplus rounds, which of course we're getting, 50, 60, 70 years from when that stuff was made. And the reliability of the ammo is sometimes suspect. This gun, though, when putting modern loads into it, it runs flawlessly. But I appreciate it. This is a really cool historical piece. And while, yes, this is not a wartime production gun per se, this most definitely probably saw some service somewhere in its life. We're very fortunate to have this as our range gets built on later this year, 2024, gets open. We plan on having stuff like this for rent. If you want to feel kind of what your grandfathers felt, or feel kind of like what it was like to carry and utilize some of the weaponry of the early 20th century, especially during the World War II area, we will definitely have some of those available for you. But I really do appreciate you checking it out with us. We have a very exciting video for you next week. We're going to go into a kind of rare firearm. So I look forward to seeing you. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Until next time.